So now we want to go into some of the exciting stuff about EBMC. I'm looking at Cassandra. She gets so excited talking about finances. And part of what we want to share is that one of the things that we're moving towards, it just seems like, and this is feedback we've gotten, we being El Sangha and staff and core teachers, that a lot of the Sangha doesn't feel like they're caught up enough on what's happening. And so we want to say, hey, this is what's happening. So that's what it is today. And we want to work on our being transparent as much as possible. And sometimes, so people who know me know that I have leakage issues. So I may share way more than I should be sharing. But part of what we want to do is be able to share what's appropriate so that folks have some confidence. At least my hope is that you have some confidence in where we are and in our direction, and also know that there's still some things we need to work on. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we are financially, where we are, strategic direction, and even the building status, where we are in the building, in the next 15 minutes. I'm looking at Cassandra because she talks faster than I do sometimes. No.
Hello?
Yeah, actually. Wow. This is so fancy, y'all. We got fancy over here. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Looks like some people aren't hearing. Is that better? Okay, Mahogany Moten, who was our event manager years and years ago, said that the way you hold a mic is either ice cream or rock star. So I'm going with ice cream. Hi, everybody. I'm Cassandra Shaler. I'm the development director at EBMC, and I'm so happy to see all your lovely faces. A lot of them I recognize. It's good to have some OGs in the house and also folks who are newer to the community, and everybody is welcome. So next slide, please, Kristen. So in thinking about where things are for us in this moment, one of the things we wanted to talk about are strengths and the constraints that we're navigating in the present and trying to balance. And always thinking about the way that we're held by Sangha, who's in our community, and this powerful vision that we have for EBMC. And within that, when we think about Sangha, one of the constraints sometimes is the capacity of the Sangha. So EBMC's always largely been a volunteer effort, and whatever we do has to be within the limits of our ability to steward the work. We're also in this moment, as many people I'm sure know, facing constraints around the economy, a downturn in philanthropy in particular. There's decreased giving overall and some constriction by foundations in the last couple of years, but especially now in the wake of the new administration and all of the cuts and a need for consolidation around like funding basic survival for people. And so, and some hesitation and concern about, how and where to spend. We're also confronting the COVID and post-COVID realities. We're working really hard to create opportunities for people to come back in person. We're seeing less of that than we would have expected. And then that means less sort of investment day to day and a decline in volunteerism overall at EBMC. The political landscape, I almost feel like I don't have to say anything about it, but let's just take a moment to acknowledge just how heavy this time is, the impact on all of us personally, collectively. And the chaos and trauma of the moment is really leading to overwhelm and burnout, et cetera. And we feel like one of the strengths of EBMC has always been creating a space of refuge and belonging for people in those hardest moments. And certainly for people engaging in social justice work in the world, this is what we're made for. So it's a constraint, but it's also an opportunity. At EBMC, we've had a few leadership shifts in the last 3 to 4 years, and there's now a new leadership team on both the staff and the L Sangha, which has meant some regrouping, reorienting, and in the wake of all the other things I mentioned, an increase in the need for staff to do things which a large number of volunteers used to do at EBMC. So capacity issues come up around that. And then there's also this piece that is this powerful vision that we have had from jump, like what we're hoping to achieve here, what we believe is needed in our community and in the world right now, and how we can meet that moment. Also bumps up against our capacity. So we're asking this question: how do our vision, commitments, and mission meet the realities of the moment? So all of that said, in spite of all those challenges, we're about to be 20 years old, y'all, next year. And this is how our financial picture looks right now. So
Next slide, Kristen.
Oh, sorry. So sorry. So our current bank balance for the building fund is almost $3 million. Our operating fund is $930,000. And to give a sense of what that means, most nonprofits aim to have 3 to 6 months of operating reserves, and most of them in reality have less than 3 months on hand. So for now, we're in a relatively healthy place given what we have in the bank. And you can see our annual budget for the last, 2 years and then this year, we've been strategically making ourselves leaner in order to address what I'll talk about in a minute is a gap in funding. And we have, an incredibly strong community and a lot of goodwill from the communities beyond us. Say numbers again, hard to read, got it. Okay, so current bank balance, the building fund is $2.8 million, almost $3 million. The operating fund is $930,000. And our annual budget for this year is $780,000. 2024, it was around 900. 2025, it was around 800. And, in addition to our community and the goodwill and the energy within it, there's also a lot of, as most people know, like tremendous respect and love and recognition and appreciation for us outside of us. Like folks in the world want us to succeed. And we really want to be serious about what all of these things mean for the future. So just quickly, and we don't have a whole lot of time, but this information is available. In looking at our revenue last year, just so you get a sense of where
Next
our
slide, Kristen.
funding comes from. So the bulk of our revenue comes from individual folks. It's either one-time donations, major donor donations, or Friends of EBMC. And it's worth noting that, like last year, 30% of our income came from, 30% of our revenue came from Friends of EBMC. That was about $110,000.
What's Friends of EBMC?
Recurring donors, so those who give monthly or sometimes quarterly, but mostly monthly. And speaking of, we're in the middle of a fundraising drive and really want to invite you to become a friend of EBMC. Or if you're already a friend of EBMC, to increase your donation. This is a really key time to do that. And then next slide. In terms of expenses, the bulk of expenses goes to cover staff, and our rent is $108,000 a year. Our operating expenses are about $88,000, and program expenses are about $40,000. Okay, and then this slide, and I'm, again, not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but just to sort of give a sense of like 2018 to now.
Next slide, Kristen.
Thank you. So that wild blue bar that's sticking up in the middle represents support from the Katali Foundation, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But a couple of things that are worth noting around recurring donors, Friends of EBMC. So we've had a slow but steady increase in friends since the beginning of EBMC. And to give a sense of it, in 2018, we had about 315 friends, and that raised about $95,000. And then we went to a height of about 450 friends in 2021. That was when everything had pivoted online and a lot of people were participating online. And that was about $150,000 that year from friends. And we've seen a decline since then. Now we're back at about 350 friends and raising about $108,000 from that group. And again, now's the time to become a friend. And then the other thing that's probably worth noting is that program income has declined. In 2018, the income from programs was $108,000. In 2022, it was $122,000, but then in 2024, it was $45,000, and in 2025, it was $59,000. So that's one of the things that we're addressing now in things that Renato's going to talk about in a minute. And then, sorry, one more. Next slide. This is just to address the issue of like this, the way that well, okay, let me just stick to my notes here. So historically, we reliably have been able to raise around $450,000 to $500,000 every year, like from, very early in our existence, from friends, from fundraising events, from programs. And then in 2019, we received a 5-year grant from the Katali Foundation, and that was for $400,000 a year for those 5 years. And that enabled us to increase expenses, like offering a living wage and benefits to staff, increasing staff hours, especially in programs and administration, and streamlining systems, et cetera. And at the same time that we have had more to spend since 2019 and the budget, the expenses went up, we've also been really frugal with those funds over the years, and we've stretched them beyond the 5-year grant period. And so the hope has been that where this gap existed between what we historically been able to raise and what Katali provided and allowed us to do, that we, by 2027, could fill that gap with an increase in funding across the board, but especially with major donors and foundations. And given the constraints and the current situation that I was describing earlier, especially in philanthropy, that hasn't played out to the extent that we had hoped. And by operating in a lean way and decreasing expenses, the gap for this year looks to be closer to $250,000 than the gap in earlier years, which was closer to $350,000. So we still have a lot of money in the bank, and we're endeavoring to, fundraise for ourselves and decrease the gap between what we raise on our own and what we're drawing down the Katali funds for. That's what the funky line up and then the ongoing gap is about there. And so we're looking at, creative ways to fill that gap, which Renato's going to talk more about in a bit. And okay, I'm going to turn it to you then. You're next. Okay. And then you'll come back to me.
Yeah, next slide, please. So I wanted to acknowledge that we could do better, we being El Sangha staff and core teachers, in that we've surveyed our community quite a bit. And at times, we don't let folks know what we heard from the surveys. I'm not laughing because I'm laughing at us more than anything, but just we could do better. And part of what I want to say is that at the same time, we have been doing a lot of thinking and planning and deciding as much as possible as a result of those surveys. And so in the last year, we've been grateful to be able to have a lot of really incredible, talented folks who do this kind of planning and communications work as their career. And so we've been able to have folks like Christine Cordero, who former El Sangha and others, helped convene core teachers, board members, and staff a couple of times to really say, what's happening? What are we learning and where are we going and what can we do about it? So what we realized is we are at a really special phase of our own organizational and program development, and the shifts that we believe that the community is calling for is for us to be a proactive community-centered center. So meaning that we don't just wait to see what's happening in the world and just be there for folks to seek sanctuary and a refuge, but how do we make sure that we're engaging in social action even as we provide sanctuary? And so just want to acknowledge again that these have been conversations that when Cassandra named the new infrastructure of our shared leadership, right? We've been developing even more closer relationships, we, the El Sangha, with the core teachers. As the chair of the El Sangha, I've met with the core teachers pretty much every other month, just to be able to check in and provide some information and hear what direction is still wanted and needed, what we can collaborate on. And then we also, the executive committee meets with the core directors. We have a core director model, right? An administrative director, development director, and program director as part of our staff leadership that really helps strategically implement the strategic directions that we collectively set. And so I do also want to acknowledge that even today was designed by core teachers, so Rene Rivera. Even though he couldn't be here, he said, I'm going to represent the core teachers in designing today. And so we also had staff, Ramon and Dre, also work on that, and I was on that, and there may have been someone else. But then you'll notice that even with that, we invited that committee that designed today, said, oh, we can get Melvin to do a little something at the beginning, Ramon to do something, and then Cassandra to do this piece. So the agenda that we created was based on what the design committee said, this is what we want and need, or what the community might want and need to hear about, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. And so what we also got was that what we've heard is that we need to shift to what feels like a drop-in culture at EBMC towards cultivating a resilient and connected Sangha. So it's not enough just to be able to, and while at the same time, we learned a lot of that by one of our programs that started last summer after a staff and El Sangha board retreat. We said, why don't we try this thing called Gathering Ground? Just have our place open from 5 to 7 on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays when we think we can get people there. And that allowed for having new people on a regular basis say, oh, now I'm learning to meditate. But what we learned is some of them might go on to classes with Mushim to be able to say beginning mindfulness or understanding Buddhism. But what we haven't learned is how to keep them engaged in some of the social action that we know our community is really engaged with. So we're now positioning ourselves to do that, to really say, how do we not only position ourselves as a sanctuary in times of social uncertainty, but how do we explore protecting our community by actively practicing some civil resilience, resistance initiatives? And then how do we amplify our strategic partnerships? Kip, our program director, is engaged with an area-wide faith in action, kind of working with other faith leaders to be able to say, what can we do to be able to make sure we are protecting our communities in all its forms? We want to continue to create spaces for healing, emotional expression, and resilience and joy. And what's beautiful is that even starting May 18th, I think, on Monday mornings, which is tomorrow, at 7:15 a.m. at that one new grassy area on Broadway and, what is it? Broadway and 23rd, EBMC is going to provide some meditation from 7:15 to 7:45. So if you want to go out there, I think Patrick's doing some. I'm going to do a couple of sound meditation things. And if others want to go ahead and do that, that would be really cool, in addition to some of these other things. So I just want to name that. So next slide, please. Yeah.
Well, also, I just want to add, too, that like in this visioning process that we went through, one of the things we talked about was the importance of EBMC as a space for healing and emotional expression and resilience in this time, but also joy, like joy, joy, joy. So like, how do we make sure that we're integrating that into what we're offering? And I don't know how many folks in here were able to come to Buddha Bingo in November, but that was a very joyful moment for us. And
New
so
experiences for young people in drag shows.
Exactly. We want more of that. Okay, so next. Oh, you're on the blue slide. Okay. So in terms of some of the recent initiatives and pivots based on some of that internal work, this thing we're talking about, the reset and planning, like reassessing priorities and focus and engagement based on the current realities and needs. Bringing back practice groups in person. Come on, y'all. It's so important. It's so needed to be in spaces together, like today. Practice and transformative action is back. Thanks to Renato and Bong and Maureen. We're bringing back the family sangha. We're really wanting to bring back volunteerism. We need it. And that's a big piece of what we're, here to talk to folks about today. Is like everybody, we got to be all in. And very exciting, I was going to say it, but I'm going to let Patrick say it. We're also bringing back a long-standing beloved program called
Commit to Dharma. Hey! Hi, I'm Patrick Brown. I use he and they pronouns. And yeah, we're super excited because right aligned with all the things you're talking about. It was this program that years ago many of us went through that really did cultivate engagement. It cultivated like a reason, like my understanding of the Dharma got so deep within the EBMC community. My connection to the Dharma got so deep in this program that it really led me into leadership. That's why I was on the El Sangha. That's why I still volunteer for Alphabet Sangha. And so this program is a year-long program, really understanding the fundamentals, right? We'll talk about the Four Noble Truths. We'll give very deep examples of practice and how you can activate this Dharma in your everyday life. This program changed my life. When I moved here in 2013 and started this program with Larry Yang, I had a cursory knowledge of the Dharma and a cursory knowledge of what Sangha was. But really, like, part of why some of my deepest friends and experiences have been based through EBMC was through this program. So Renee Rivera, Don Haney, and myself are so excited to bring this back. It's going to be opening applications in June 1st. It'll be on the website. It will be a year long. We'll start in July, and it'll be once a month for in-person gatherings, and then once a month online gatherings. Look out for more information. We're very excited, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you, Patrick. We're so excited. And then some of this is mentioned already, but I'll just say some of the things we've launched more recently: Gather in Ground, the weekly opportunities for people to come together, a signal group and activist gatherings, being more intentional about how we're showing up as EBMC in social justice work in the community, having more large events in this space and partnering with folks around those, offering this space to community partners. Some of that is generating rental income. Some of it is because we want to make this a community asset. For instance, next week, Marcus Books is having an event in here. And check out their website because it looks like a really badass person who's coming to speak next Sunday. We're also, there's little asterisks because these are in process, but we're about to launch something called the Care Caravan, which might have some Care Bear branding. We're working on it. That is to create a core of folks to welcome people into EBMC and connect with them and provide them with information and support to create ongoing relationships. That's all I'll say about that. And then the other thing is that imminently we will be launching a new website, which, if anyone has looked at our website, is a long time coming. So really grateful to Dre, who's our development coordinator, who's also an awesome graphic designer. If you're seeing our stuff out there on social media, Dre's behind all of that. And yes, keep your eyes peeled for the new website.
Next slide, please. So I want to say a little something about the building. This building and our relationship to it. And I want to be able to note that it might be also important to know what were some things that have been done before this moment in time. So if we can see the next slide. And I realize this print is really small. Next slide, please, Kristen. Thank you. So I'm just going to read it, just so you know what's happening. But so we've had a number of real estate and fundraising efforts. So we had a real estate committee and a capital campaign committee. And folks were doing a lot of difficult things. And it yielded what it yielded. So, but let me just say that we had a thorough, intensive planning process led by the real estate committee and architects with extensive community input. So a lot of even the choice of this, it came from a lot of community input. Like we needed to make sure we had 2 different entrances and exits, right? So it wasn't going to be enough just to have one spot. We were thinking of all of our communities and how they would need to benefit. We also then, from that excitement and enthusiasm, if you will, had an ambitious vision of community healing space that includes everything we want. So we started saying, what are all the things that we want? Which led to then us having say, oh, well then in addition to the 6.5 million that we've raised, we need another $5 million to raise. And it focused on just getting introductions and relationship building with high wealth individuals and foundation over the last couple of years. But again, given the current economic political climate, there have been some constraints put upon us. So now we need to prioritize internal shifts and organization planning, and we need to reconsider a capital stack that includes multiple revenue streams, which intersects with organizational capacity. And again, organizational capacity, while we have some staff that are probably larger staff than we may have had previously, we wanted to, again, make sure that we were committed to having a living wage, staff that had a living wage and didn't feel like they had to work 2 or 3 additional jobs in addition to working here. So we've made that commitment and we're going to maintain and sustain that commitment. So if I can have the next slide. So this is what our current reset is looking like, is that we're going to bring on a consultant to support us in June, and it's going to take us time through about December to be able to say what are September. Yeah, sorry, December, something else. September. And with that consultant, we'll assess our long-term sustainability and organizational health, right? So all the things that Cassandra shared in terms of where we're heading and what our experience is in maintaining a budget of a certain size, that's telling us about what our capabilities are, not just our capacities, right? So we're going to continue to explore what are financial and operational scenarios that we can realistically hold, strengthen our financial modeling and planning clarity, meaning that we're not going to just say, oh, let's hope for a couple extra million a year and not have the capacity to do it. So these are some of the questions we're still needing to answer with the help of this consultant. What are the true operating costs, right? If we want to make sure that we have good air quality here, we have floors, restrooms that are truly accessible, the kind of system that we want to have that's hybrid, that allows for hybrid programming and in-person programming, what are the true costs of that? And then what are minimally the renovations that we need to make to get there? Like, again, the additional $5 million was based on, a couple years ago, all the things that we wanted, right? Having childcare, a kitchen, stuff all around. This flag was the new hallway, right? Where the wall would be there, and so there was all this other design there. So what actually are the minimal renovations that we can do or that are necessary? How can the building remain financially sustainable, meaning that what can we do to keep using this space, but can we do to rent the space out? Some of you may not know that there's space right above back there. You'll see windows. Those are office spaces that we could fix up or even probably rent now to some organizations that could bring us some funding. And then how can we, again, best use the space, as Cassandra said, for the community long term? That it isn't just about how do we have transactional relationships here, how do we have deep community impacts here. So, some of the potential pathways you did it, that we have here already we're thinking about, and we'd love to get your thoughts on this. So we're going to break you into small groups in a moment to just raise questions or thoughts or reflections and hopes. The idea of just having some strategic rentals and or shared use models. Even have co-ownership and partnership possibilities, right? Why not being able to bring someone in who wants to contribute $5 million to do the whole thing if they want to have the space. I saw some smiles, so I'm hoping that means you. No, I'm kidding. Or what can we do around some temporary leasing while fundraising continues? Revenue generation aligned with our values, right? So that we can have what we've already envisioned, a way to preserve our long-term presence and mission, create an active, welcoming, and sustainable space. And we want to be able to complete this assessment really by the end of summer, early September, because by January, when we have our birthday party, we'll be able to have more people saying, this is what we're doing in 2027, to be able to either relaunch a campaign or maybe even announce a partnership, or just say, this is what the rebuilding phase looks like.